I can't see you, but obviously you can see me. So again, my name is Lacey Zavala. This is the last of the series that I have done for you on adverse childhood experiences and trauma-informed care, resiliency, and now we're going to focus more on you and how the work can impact you. So today our topic is secondary traumatic stress and self-care. So given the complex needs and demanding conditions of working with people who've experienced trauma and adversity, professionals like yourselves often experience persistent and cumulative stress. And if we leave those things unrecognized and unmanaged, we're at an increased risk for acquiring what's called secondary traumatic stress symptoms. So things like severe exhaustion, isolation, reduced capacity to connect with others, an increased sensitivity to sensory input, and just a negative overall worldview. So it's really important for people like us who are in helping positions to learn to recognize the signs of secondary trauma. And in order to continue to provide care that's empathic and that's trauma-informed and that's high quality, we really have to start leaning on our support network, as well as develop some additional strategies to nurture our own healing and our own resilience. Resilience is not a matter of personal choice, but rather it's supported through an environment that facilitates healing and positive development in the face of adversity. So we're kind of taking everything that we've learned about working with children who've experienced trauma and kind of starting to apply that to ourselves as well. So today I'm going to be using a lot of material as well as imagery from a book called Trauma Stewardship. It's called An Everyday Guide to Caring for Self While Caring for Others. We're also going to be watching a TED Talk by the author. Her name is Laura Vandernoot-Lipsky. We're going to try to keep the subject somewhat light by adding in comics. She uses a lot of comics from the book, as well as do a lot of exercises today to help you start to practice some of the ideas that we'll be discussing. So really our overall agenda today, I want you to be able to walk away with an understanding of what STS, or secondary traumatic stress, is, how it can manifest in our bodies and in our actions, both in our personal lives as well as at work. What is self-care? Provide you with some different prevention and intervention tools. And then how do you walk away with at least 2 new tools to help you to nurture your own healing and your own resilience. Right. So what I'd like to do now, Monty, they have in front of them the handouts that I sent.
Yes, the entire packet's there. Which do you want us to start with first?
Perfect. So what we'll do is if you can turn to your self-care assessment, we're going to take a few minutes to do it. And Monty, if you can kind of just let me know when everyone seems to be about done. And then we're going to pair up and we're going to walk through some questions together. Okay? So take a few minutes and then Monty, I'll lean on you to help me with that, okay?
Okay, so right now we have the self-care, which is 2-sided. One has information completed and the other side is blank.
So there's
I'm sorry. You're referring to the assessment.
Yeah.
This page.
Yeah. So there's several questions that we'll need to answer.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you.
Is that better? Everybody all set? All set? All set? We're all set.
Okay, great. All right, so this is anonymous. I am going to ask that everyone partners up with one person, but you don't have to share your answers with them. Just maybe talk through some of these discussion questions. So, and you don't have to answer them all. We're only going to talk for maybe 5 minutes or so. But were there any surprises for you? Did it give you any new ideas that maybe you hadn't thought of before? Which ones maybe seem like they would just be more burdensome than a benefit for you personally? What are you already doing to practice self-care in different domains, your physical, your psychological, emotional, spiritual, and workplace realms? And of those things that you do now, which one sparks your interest? Or how might you incorporate them into the future? And then what's one thing that you would like to try emphasize? And if anyone would like to share after your partner share, you can come on up to the microphone and talk to me about it, okay? So just take about 5 minutes, partner up with somebody, and then we'll take it.
What makes it
not here?
You gotta explain too, though, like, that's easy to say in general, but talking about daily life, like, ain't nobody just said, work and not take the work home. Because I know for a fact, if you're irritated here, somebody will hear about that, but feel it. You know what I'm saying? I know that for a fact.
That might be true, but I mean,
yeah.
You might have to decompress.
I guess the question is, how do you feel about that? I guess the question is, how do you feel about that? Like if you find yourself taking those things home with you, taking, emotionally.
It ain't nowhere for you to feel. Because at the end of the day, only you gonna know when it's time to chill out. Ain't nobody else gonna know when it's time for you to, chill out or
right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a reason that you're irritated. So if you was irritated at work, more so than not, you're going to take that home.
So,
and if it's at that irritation to where it's like it's up here, 6, 7, 8, you still going to be irritated when you get in that car.
Yeah, but the way I look at it, you got to find stuff to take that stress and that irritation off. I know I read. When I'm under a lot of stress, I want to read. Because that takes my mind off of the stress that's going on. And it'll help me refocus on something.
I mean, like I said, that's
good.
I mean, that's cool, but we talking about daily life.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? They not doing that. Listen, most people in this world is not, when they get irritated at work, like I said, somebody is going to...
What about getting irritated at home?
No, that's what I'm saying. You get irritated at home and bring it to work.
Yeah.
That's a lot, though. Like,
yeah.
That happens a lot.
So, I think when you think about self-care, the question comes down to, if those are the kind of things that are happening, what can you do, or what's in your life, or what can you put into your life that can help to change that? Like, you say that you like reading for you is a great way for you to decompress and kind of release all of that.
And see what you're saying, like you said, when you take it home and somebody gonna hear about it, that's a way of releasing it. That's part of the self.
But at the same time, though, like, they don't know that you got a bad day.
No, I'm saying when you talk about it, but tell your girl or somebody.
But who really talking about it?
He doesn't air.
A lot of people.
I'm talking about, like, you gonna hear about it before you sit down and talk about it. Because when you get home, let's say your wife comes to the door, like, what's wrong? Talk about it. Like, you still, you know what I'm saying? Like, you still have an attitude.
I've been there before.
You know what I'm saying? No, listen. Like you just said,
I've been there.
Is you talking about it, but you still took that irritation home.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? And then now you don't want to talk to her.
As long as you don't hold on to it throughout the day.
I mean, you got a lot of people that got a lot of stuff going on in their world. Like, you might not have a chance to decompress because you
doing so much. So let's just say a common person, get off work, go home, take a shower, put some clothes on. You got to figure out, you know, what you about to eat, or you know what I'm saying, like. But let's just say you got kids.
Yeah.
You're really not about to decompress because let's just say the kids running around the house all wild. That irritation is building up because now not only was you irritated at work, now your kids do some shit that's irritating you too. Listen, I go do that daily. You know what I'm saying? So when I do, you know what I'm saying, if something is going on, I'm irritated at work, I go home and, you know, I feel like I'm about to chill. That's why I tell you, like, when I get to the crib, like, I got little babies and shit I go to. So when I get home, I can't go to sleep. You know what I'm saying? Like, I be having to wait till they take their nap and then I go home. So it's kind of like I'm irritated.
So what do you find joy in?
I mean, shit, at the end of the day, like, I mean, with me, I can't really do too much. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I could sit down, I could listen to music, I could watch TV, but I still got little kids that need more attention than
You
me
find
trying to sit
enjoyment?
down.
Do you find enjoyment spending time with them?
Yeah, of course, but they still do shit that irritate me, so I'm still kind of like, I'm half and half. But, you know, I'm not going to take that out on my kids. It's just
right.
Like, y'all irritate the shit out of me too, so I'm going to just sit back and, you know, whatever. But the irritation still comes when you still got to yell at your kids. You still irritated. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, you're still going to be irritated. So whatever went on at work, coming home to, you know, more irritation is kind of just building up. So, you know, it's a lot of times, that's why people do, you know, leave the house, or, you know what I'm saying, like, go somewhere. I go sit by the water or something, chill, for real. I get me some liquor, and, you know, I call it a day. I promise you. Because I don't like to spaz out on people. You know what I'm saying? I learned that from Gracie. You know what I'm saying? You know, it take a lot for me to get mad. But I do get irritated, like, very quick. So I know, you know, like, I ain't gonna harm nobody, I ain't gonna hurt nobody. I just know how to take myself away from, you know, being in situations. So I'll just be like, yeah, you're right. That's it. I know how to take myself away. Like I said, I like that from Crazy Man. That's what a lot of that stuff came from. And then you got a lot of people now, like, they don't like to talk about the problem.
No. And the case they have because they scared
Of course. That's why
You waiting for my prompt, Monty? You're just kind of letting the conversation roll?
I think we've had a fair bit of discussion.
Good, all right. Does anyone want to come up, and no pressure, if you'd like to maybe share some insights, that's great. If not, we can keep moving on as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
What she say?
Some of the stuff we came up about.
It'll pick you up.
And all that.
It'll pick you up.
She said, wait, what?
Well, we came up about the stress and work, and then sometimes it's going hard with you, you got stressed.
Hello?
Trying to find ways to do that.
Hello? Can she hear me?
Yeah. Can you hear him?
I think so.
What we talked about was you know, how you working your daily life at work, and taking, you know, if you're irritated at work, taking it home, you know, basically giving your irritation off to, you know, your family or whatever, without wanting to sit down and talk about it.
Mm-hmm. So you don't want to talk about your day at work, you just kind of want to keep moving forward, but that irritation kind of spills over into your home life, right?
Right.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about some strategies for things that maybe you can do to check yourself before you walk in that door to go home. Because just because maybe you had a day that was not so great at work doesn't necessarily mean that you have to continue to have that same kind of day at home.
Right.
Oh, yeah, great, thank you. Anybody else?
I don't think so.
Oh, yeah, did you, any comments?
No, no other comments at the moment.
Okay, great. Keep moving on. All right, so that was a good segue, actually, right? So what does our work do to us? So I had said that we're going to be looking at some of the comics that the author puts in her book. So if anyone is as old as I am, you might remember the show Lassie on television, right? So Lassie was a helper dog. She was always running to the rescue, right? But Lassie has now found herself needing some of her own help, right? Because all she does is give to other people. A little chuckle. So if we think back to when we got into this type of work, when we got into the helping profession, right? Most of us came in with a passion, right? We wanted to make a difference. We really thought that we could change the system or change policies or change practices, really make a difference in the lives of kids and families that we're working with, right? And many of you might still feel that way, that same sort of level of passion. But most of us probably found that first year was that energy, the idealism, and passion, but over time, reality tends to set in, right? So what you might find kind of in your second year is that hearing those traumatic stories over and over again starts to take a toll on your own mental and physical health. And that happens pretty quickly when you're dealing with trauma survivors on a daily basis. By the fifth year or so, if you're still in the work, because we do know that there is a high turnover with this type of work, oftentimes people find themselves just thoroughly exhausted, frustrated, like we talked about, and also having experienced perhaps vicarious trauma. And we're going to talk more about what vicarious trauma and secondary trauma and burnout, compassion fatigue are, okay? And then today, whatever year you're in, right, you're still here. So where is that level of energy, idealism, and passion for you? I don't need to hear that out loud, but maybe just think about kind of where you're at with all of this. So here are some of the traditional assumptions of working with children and families, or kind of like these myths, right? People aren't identified as cases. We're just supposed to look at everything clinically. We try to fix people through intervention. Having feelings is a sign of weakness, and oftentimes we apologize when we express them. We can leave our work in the office and just forget about it when we go home. And we don't have our own histories of trauma that might be triggered. We know that these things are not true. So what is secondary traumatic stress? Oftentimes also referred to as vicarious trauma or secondary victimization. So this is all those negative effects that someone like ourselves working with trauma survivors experience when we're exposed to somebody else's trauma. It's the emotional duress that results when we're hearing about that firsthand traumatic experience of someone else that's sitting in front of us. The symptoms, if left untreated, can mimic that of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. And it occurs when individuals who care about other people who have been harmed then feel committed to and obligated to help them. And these effects can be cumulative and potentially permanent if we don't work on them ourselves. So who's at risk for secondary traumatic stress? 6 to 20% of therapists who are working with traumatized populations, and up to 50% of child welfare workers are at risk. We don't have a whole lot of data on this, unfortunately, so these are the two biggest populations that have been studied. Any professional, though, who is in the position to hear the recounting of traumatic experiences is at risk. And the risk tends to be greater among women, probably because the majority of folks who are in helping professions tend to be women, but also those who are highly empathic, those who have their own unresolved personal trauma or ACEs, professionals that have a very heavy caseload of working with traumatized kids, Those that don't have a very broad social support network are often quite isolated when they leave work. And those who just feel compromised because maybe they didn't have enough training or the right kind of training to do the job that they need. So STS is a bit different from compassion fatigue and burnout. You may have heard these terms, but compassion fatigue is natural. It's a treatable consequence of working with suffering people, regardless of the cause of that suffering. Burnout is when all of these symptoms over time lead to exhaustion. You just don't have the physical or emotional strength or that motivation to continue to do the work. And that's really a result of these prolonged stressors. STS, on the other hand, can kind of emerge suddenly and at any time during one's career, whereas burnout comes on gradually. It's often caused because you've got these feelings of not being compensated fairly, or there's not a lot of incentives in the workplace, or maybe you haven't taken a look at your career goals, and so burnout is like, okay, I kind of have met the max of all I can do, and it's time for me to move on to something else. And I felt that I worked in child welfare for 20 years, and I realized like this is really taking a toll on me. I am definitely burnt out. It's time for me to do something else for a while. So burnout might end with a job change, but STS might still continue despite changing careers or changing jobs. So again, exposure can be through witnessing a person actually going through trauma, so you weren't the one that experienced it, but you saw it happen. Or it could be hearing somebody's verbal report of what happened to them, especially a child. It could be through watching children play or drawing, or how they're reacting to the trauma. And you can also get it through media coverage or reading case reports or other documents about trauma. So we are bombarded today with information, social media and the news, and it all seems to be quite negative, right? So that could also potentially be a source of secondary traumatic stress. So when somebody else's trauma becomes your trauma, here's how it can look. It might look like being unable to talk about your feelings, being angry and irritable quite often. It could be just avoiding things that used to make us feel good, people. Could be different numbing behaviors, which may lead to addiction. It could be hypervigilance, so being easily startled or jumpy. It could be physical symptoms like over or under eating, difficulty sleeping, having nightmares, chronic exhaustion, just fatigue physically, emotionally, spiritually. It could look like diminished feelings of satisfaction, so with your personal life, your professional life. It could be intrusive thoughts, things that just keep coming up based about the trauma. It just has this overall sense of just feeling trapped by your work. And so as a result, you might respond inappropriately to a person or disproportionately, right? So your feelings are kind of bigger, right, than whatever the circumstance called for. It could also mean that you just completely withdraw, or that you just have to avoid all trauma material. And I know for many of us, as the pandemic wore on, like a lot of us were sort of shutting down that trauma material. We just couldn't take any more in, right? I know that was certainly true. When a person's frame of reference is disturbed or beliefs about other people in the world are affected, that could be a sign of secondary traumatic stress as well. So you might see the world as a much more dangerous place. So I may have told this story before, but one of my post staff that I still keep in touch with was getting a lot of human trafficking cases when we worked with the CAC together, the Children's Advocacy Center. And she and her partner were going to Detroit. I think they were going to a ball game, and they saw just a man and a child walking on the side of the street. And rather than her thinking, like, dad taking the child for a walk, her mind automatically went to that place of human trafficking. And so it seems like that, those little indicators that tell you that maybe you're starting to experience something. So you're seeing the world as a danger. You might see other people as evil or untrustworthy or exploitative as well. It might be just difficult to think about the world as a good place or about humans as good people. You might start to struggle with your own personal relationships and intimacy, and you might just feel like you're out of control. You've lost a sense of control over things. So similarly, your assumptions about safety, right? Everything is unsafe. A thought like it really happened can turn to it can happen to me, it can happen to my loved ones, and then just a general distrust of the world. And an increased sense of wanting to protect all of those folks that you love. All right. So a few other ways that STS can impact us or your family. You could find that you have what's called ego depletion, right? So you just have a very limited pool of time which to draw upon to get through your day, right? So for a lot of us, this looks like you gave your all at work, you come home, and you just shut down. You turn on your Netflix or your Hulu, you grab a beer or whatever it is, and you're just spent. You just spend the rest of the day on the couch. It could also look like decision fatigue, where you're making decisions all day, especially those of us who work in leadership or administration, making really tough decisions all day. Like, you just don't have it in you to make any more decisions about your personal life, right? Or your brain starts to look for shortcuts. So maybe instead of thinking through possible consequences of your actions, you tend to act more impulsively, or maybe you just do nothing. And then there's this added layer of our own ACEs, our own traumas that we've talked about, right? So all these things, different types of abuse and neglect, or living with someone with mental illness or substance abuse, domestic violence, separation, divorce, having an incarcerated parent, so on and so forth, right? If these things are unresolved, they can carry into the work that we do and have a greater likelihood that we start to experience secondary traumatic stress. So how do we determine the impact of the trauma that we're hearing on ourselves, right? So it really just depends on what our current life circumstances are. If we're really stressed out financially or with relationships or things like that, we're more likely to experience STS. You have to take a look at your childhood history and what's still unresolved there. What are your ways of coping with stress that lends to it, as well as your type of personality and your temperament too. So in addition to experiencing STS by hearing or seeing other people's traumas, it can also be compounded by additional factors. So things like working conditions, right? If you're feeling unsafe at work, if you have to take on extra projects at work but you don't feel like you've been adequately trained, paperwork, right? So a lot of the systems that we deal with require these gobs and gobs of paperwork that we have to complete, as well as different measures of productivity that we have to meet, and that in and of itself can be quite stressful with timelines. Having to learn a new system or maybe a new curriculum that you're facilitating, decreasing resources to do what you need to do at work, teams that aren't very well organized or that aren't working together well. So a study was done by Matthew in 2015, and what they found is that professionals oftentimes say things like this: I don't have any problems with my clients or my patients. In fact, I love my work. Everything around it that's grinding me down, right? So it's kind of this organizational stress, and we'll look at a diagram in a little bit that's compounding the work that you're doing with the provider. All right. So I wanted to see if there's any questions before we start to actually walk through the 16 warning signs that you've got some STS going on. All right. So this might be a little bit hard to see, but again, we'll go through each of these 16 warning signs with some comics to just try to keep it a little bit light. So the first one is feeling helpless and hopeless. So the wolves are howling at the moon and they're saying, are we really making an impact, right? Or the sense that I really can't ever do enough. The penguins are saying, we just haven't been flapping them hard enough. Penguins can't really fly. And then this one, the man says to his son, just remember, son, it doesn't matter whether you win or lose unless you want daddy's love. These are maybe a little dark as well, right?
Wow.
Was that Monty?
I said, wow.
Yeah, wow, right? So these are comics that were found in the book. So feeling helpless and hopeless, right? So that could be a person that is experiencing helpless or hopeless, might wonder, like, why am I even doing this? What is the point? Or you might be feeling just overwhelmed, and so nothing you can do, nothing that you do can fix the situation. You might also feel like you're holding yourself responsible for what's going on for your clients or for your patients. And in the sense that one can never do enough, you might say something like, I'm not doing enough and I should be doing more. That's a very widespread belief, especially in health and professional fields. It could also be this like sense of not enoughness, right, or scarcity, that could be viewed through the lens of systemic oppression, whereby certain groups are told implicitly or explicitly that they are less than or they're not good enough. In addition to internalized messages we may personally have about being enough, as professionals working in the trauma field, there can be a sense that we are just never doing enough. All right, so here we have hypervigilance, and the dog that's laying on the couch with the therapist said, they bark at everything, can't go wrong that way. With diminished creativity, he's like holding his chest and he's saying, really, I'm fine. It was just a fleeting sense of purpose. I'm sure it will pass. And then the guy on the mat down at the bottom says, I'm crazed with this global path. Let me get back to you. So hypervigilance occurs when we are so wholly focused on our jobs that it feels impossible to really be present for anything else in our lives. And it can make us feel like we're always on, even when there's nothing that we do or should do about a certain situation. And it can be understood as an attempt to regain control or establish safety and prevent future things from happening, future bad things from happening. And then diminished creativity is just feeling stagnant and uncreative. And that really causes our overall joy to decrease and makes us feel like less innovative at work, just not really able to come up with good solutions or problem solve like we used to. And the more stress that we feel at work, the more that we crave that structure and the less flexible and open that we become. So it's really important to have outlets to be creative in the workplace. So as we're moving through, I should have said this at the beginning, I kind of want you to just take note of the things that maybe stand out to you that are true for you or somewhat true for you. And again, I'm not going to pick on anybody, but if you could just kind of keep those in mind as we're going through the rest of the training today. So here we have the inability to embrace complexity. So the guy in the phone says, what I'm proposing is this: no. I feel like we've all had that reel in our head sometimes, right? That's what we want to say, no. And then minimizing, we've got Superman over here at the pool, and he says, listen, pal, they're all emergencies. So with the inability to embrace complexity, indicators that you are struggling to embrace complexity include maybe wanting or craving clear signs of good or bad or right or wrong, right? So you really looking for that black and white thinking. The feeling the need to have to choose sides about something, or if your thinking just feels really scattered and fractured. Workers who are struggling with the inability to embrace complexity may make assumptions or pass judgments or gossip. And it's important if you're feeling this way to be able to slow down and ask yourself, what could be going on here? What else can we look at? What have I forgotten to consider, and what would be most helpful? And then with minimizing, people exposed to other traumatic stories may begin to compare client stories to each other and kind of start to rank those stories in order of severity. We might begin to downplay one client's trauma over another's. We might go through the motions of nodding our heads and acting like we're listening, but we're really just losing our compassion when we're starting to compare the stories against one another. So chronic exhaustion, a physical ailment. He's got all these papers on his desk, and he says, "No, not there, please. That's where I'm going to put my head." And then the inability to listen or deliberate. He says, "No, Thursday's out." How about never? Is never good for you? Okay. So with chronic exhaustion, a physical ailment, we talked a little bit about this, but it can cause just this overwhelming sense of fatigue in your mind, in your heart, your body, your soul, just exhausted from the work. It can also just manifest as physical complaints, things like back pain or migraines, high blood pressure, depression, anxiety. And even when we're faced with chronic exhaustion and physical issues, workers may have a hard time taking time away from work and getting a break, right? So oftentimes people who are in our profession just find it really difficult to take time off. And then the inability to listen or to deliberate. Workers struggling with trauma exposure response, they look for ways to avoid doing their work. They might forget to call a client back or take a long time to get back from lunch or from an off-site meeting, or look for other ways to just not engage in their work. And it can also show up in our personal lives, so avoid going out with people. They don't pick up their phone, don't return text messages, or who are just really unemotionally available for their loved ones at the end of the day. We have dissociative moments. So he says here it's like a cubicle world, right? So in the dim fluorescent lighting, it's meant to emphasize the general absence of hope. And then the sense of persecution, the dog says, is always sit, stay, heal, never think, innovate, be yourself. So for dissociative moments, those can happen when a person experiences those intrusive or overwhelming feelings that just take them out of that present moment. And you might find yourself thinking about a traumatic detail, something that a client has said to you, and then realize that you haven't heard the last few things that someone else has said to you. You're really just disconnected. You're not present anymore. They're very common, these dissociative moments, and they're a normal way to respond to trauma. It only really becomes problematic when we pretend our reactions aren't happening or when we try to bury our feelings. And then the sense of persecution means that we feel a profound lack of control in our lives, and we begin to believe, maybe consciously or subconsciously, that other people have more influence over our own lives than we do, and we start to lack that personal agency to make meaningful changes in our lives. It can also be feeling mistreated, and that becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy, so our brains are constantly seeking out and focusing on anything that proves, your hypothesis to be right, that you're the victim, that you're being persecuted. Great, we've had a couple yogis on the mat here for guilt. I just found in Eastern philosophy that's very accepting of SUVs. And then fear, the kid says, I like recess a lot better before the safety helmet. So it can be really easy to feel guilty about our own privilege or resources or experiences when we're working with people who've been through trauma. It's a very common reaction, and it's very normal, but it can undermine our ability to really connect with our clients as we are beginning to compare our own stories with theirs. We might intentionally try to minimize our own stories or discounts the good things that we have or that have happened to us. When we try to hide those parts of ourselves from clients, we start being genuine. Guilt can also interfere with our ability to be present and to express gratitude in our own lives. And then fear might manifest itself in many different ways. It could be the fear of being a victim, fearing your own feelings, the fear of being vulnerable. It's a very normal emotion, especially in the field of trauma work. And we may experience a good deal of fear as a result of our work, but if we don't know how to process it, it can be all-consuming. Okay, just a few more. Then we're going to start to move into some strategies. So anger and cynicism. We've got some elves in Santa's workshop saying, obviously, behind all the jolliness, there's a lot of rage. We have the cow jumping over the moon, and one of the cows says, but she'll come down eventually, and she'll come down hard. And then the inability to empathize or numbing, the doctor says, are you sure you're not confusing manic depressive with a weak? So with anger and cynicism, anger is another common feeling for those of us who work in helping professions. We can be mad at all of the injustices in the world or the lack of resources, the way that we feel about how maybe we're treated at work, or just about client situations as well. It's another feeling that can be really challenging to accept and to work through. Many of us have been told our entire life that it's not okay to be angry, right? So it's important that we really take a look at and examine our anger and try to get to the root of what's going on, the root cause of our anger. And once we can start to process that, then we can move forward. And then the inability to empathize and numbing. When we become overwhelmed by our work, we might feel numb or struggle to feel empathy towards others. John Conte, who's one of the forefathers of trauma exposure therapy, says that as workers, we never can feel like a sponge. As workers, we can feel like a sponge that's never been wrung out. So we're just too saturated with trauma to take on any more, right? Take on a wet sponge. There's a max level of water it can absorb. We may numb by using drugs or alcohol, or by overworking. People numb out that way too, or by overscheduling themselves. I'm guilty of that. And some workplaces adapt to permanent crisis mode, right? So everyone is always rushing about, and you just feel that level of anxiety in the workplace, even when there's really no crisis going on. For addictions, we've got some guys at the bar are saying, boy, I'm going to pay for this tomorrow at yoga class. And then the people down below are saying, I'm slowly weaning myself off employment. And then grandiosity is this inflated sense of importance related to one's work. So the woman says, must you proceed everything you say with, this is your captain speaking? So people use drugs and alcohol or other distractions to check out, right? A lot of people are addicted to their phones and social media nowadays. We check out from our work as well as from our personal lives and our internal thoughts and our feelings. But some people also might use work as an addiction. They might work late, check their emails all the time, even when they're not, at work, find excuses to connect back into work. And then with grandiosity, or this inflated sense of importance, when work is really our only identity or becomes the center of our identity, this can stem from our need to feel important and to feel valuable. So we might find ourselves thinking, who's going to do it if I'm not there? Or I can't leave because my clients need me. So when this occurs, we might just lose touch with our own limits as individuals, or the importance of being able to depend on other people. And acknowledge the value that we bring to our work without making our work all about who we are, right? So it can be one part of your identity and not the central focus. All right. So I'm thinking, let's see, we're about at 10 o'clock. Do you think folks can just kind of get up when they need to, or do we need to take a formal break?
Why don't we take a quick 10-minute formal break? That'd really help.
Yeah, that sounds sounds great. I know this material can be quite heavy. We are going to watch a TED Talk next, and then we'll start to really move into intervention. So, so about 10 minutes. You let me know when everybody can be back on.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. All right, so the work that we do comes like this, right? So I'm going to give a couple of thought bubbles, and they're kind of like opposites almost, right? So on one hand, you might think that I'm really committed to the consumers that I serve, but on the other hand, it's like the more that I care, the more that I end up getting hurt. Or I want so much to help, but I just can't change the future. I go home many nights and I ask myself why I'm doing this, but their faces and their stories pull at me and I can't say no. I want to hear and honor their stories, but when I sit with her, she reminds me of my own trauma. I need self-care, but I just don't have any time for myself. I'm just doing so, right? It can also look like a parallel process, right? So sometimes when we are experiencing STS, what the work is doing to us is often parallel to the experience that the children that we're working with have had or are having. So our systems frequently repeat those very experiences that have been toxic for the people that we're supposed to be treating. So this might look like you thinking administration's waiting for me to do something wrong, and the child is thinking, I can't trust adults. They'll eventually hurt me. Or I have no power or control over my work, and the child's saying it doesn't matter what I do, someone's always going to take it away. You might say it's much easier to do it myself than have to collaborate, and the child says it's me against the world, I'm the only one that has my back. Or I can't concentrate on one thing because I have so many responsibilities and expectations. The child says, there's no way I can pay attention in school. I keep thinking about all that has happened to me. Or if I had done my job better, this wouldn't have happened. My fault that I'm in foster care. So I want to talk about how this might be impacting you directly, right? We talked about the different warning signs of STS, but I kind of want to talk about the different domains and how it might be affecting you. So as we're going through, I want you to pay particular attention to the one that you feel most drawn to, like the one that speaks to your experience, that you're having the most symptoms within, okay? And what I'd like to do, maybe just to kind of get up, when we're done going through these 6, usually what I would do if I was in person is I would have everyone kind of go to a different area of the room so that we could see how many people, because it tends to be clumped together. You know, there's a couple that there tend to be more people in. So I want it to still be anonymous, so maybe what we'll do is we'll have them close their eyes and raise their hands, Monty, and you could just kind of jot down numbers for me real quick. I'm just curious to kind of see how it's impacting staff. But okay, so think through which one you're going to pick when we're done going through these 6, okay? So you might be affected more cognitively, meaning that you just feel more pessimistic all the time, or you might have this all or nothing thinking, just you lost your critical thinking skills or your perspective. You see everybody as a threat, clients, peers, supervisors, they're all the enemy. And you might just not be keeping yourself in check, so you're having decreased self-monitoring. You might be more impacted physically, where those are those psychosomatic things, the headaches, tense muscles, stomach aches, fatigue, nightmares, not being able to fall asleep or stay asleep, difficulties with eating. Or you might find yourself more emotionally impacted, so those feelings of helplessness, hopelessness, overwhelm, a loss of confidence, apathy, detached, dissociative, irritability, okay? Then we have the performance of your job tasks, right? So if your quality at work is going down, if your quantity, your productivity has gone down, you've lost motivation, you're avoiding doing certain things at work, you're making more mistakes, or maybe you're setting yourself to high perfectionism standards, or you're obsessing about all of the details. It could also be that you're finding your work behavior is more impacted. So if you're calling up more often, you're showing up late, you're having more conflicts at work, you're overworking, or you're switching jobs pretty often. And then socially, I know this could be for me, this is my greatest impact. I don't want to meet in another team. I don't want to collaborate with anybody. When I go home, I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to go out. I don't want to do anything, right? So that loss of social support, I'm just withdrawing from all of the activities that maybe I enjoyed doing before. I'm not communicating with people. The quality of my relationships goes down, okay? So we've got the 6 are cognitive, physical, or emotional. Then job tasks, work behavior, and social. So maybe what we'll do, if you guys can kind of close your eyes while you raise your hands real quick. Monty is going to do a quick count.
How about if I do this? I'm going to turn my laptop around and then see if you can get a count that way.
Okay, great. How many folks are in the room today?
7.
7. Okay. All right. So we'll do this. We'll just try to keep it anonymous. I can't see everybody. Monty is the thing. I see 1, 2, 3.
There's 2 that you won't be able to see. They're not in frame. They're sitting opposite of me.
Okay. Great. Okay. And then the person that's on the outside, I can't see them either.
Right.
So I think we're cool right now.
Talk about them over there.
Yeah,
Do
there's.
you want us to move over there or something?
Right,
We can go in the back of the room.
One moment. And then once they're in position, we can all close our eyes and you can call them off one at a time.
There we go. All right, that sounds good. And then you'll take tallies for the other 2, Monty, or are they coming around here?
They're
Here we
moving. They're moving right now.
go. Okay, great.
Did you see us now?
Now, if you go,
4, 5, 6. I see 6 people. And you counting yourself in the 7, Monty?
correct.
Okay. Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and close our eyes and tell me if you feel like you are more cognitively effective. Okay, so we had some people raise their hands, more than one. I think a few people didn't raise their hands, or maybe I didn't see it. But it looks like for your group, the majority of folks are impacted emotionally. Does that sound right? So those kind of like all of those symptoms that we talked about, all the warning signs of STS, the feelings of helplessness, hopelessness, overwhelm, things like that. That's how your staff are being impacted mostly. Okay, so that's something for leaders to kind of look out for and think of ways that maybe you can support staff emotionally as well. I'm sure you're doing a lot of that, but maybe something else to look at. Okay, thank you for humoring me in a non-traditional way of doing the training. So, okay, so I did say that there was a diagram I wanted to show you, right, that kind of talks about organizational stress. So we've got trauma, right, so the folks that we're dealing with who have experienced trauma, and then we have secondary traumatic stress, right, so there's an interplay between our own secondary traumatic stress and the trauma that we're hearing, right? So the trauma that we're hearing can lead to STS, and then our STS can impact the work that we're doing with our clients. And then we have this other circle called organizational stress, right? So our experience and our clients' experience can lead to organizational stress, and when we don't have the resources or the things that we need to do our job, or the adequate training, or maybe the organization is in a state of transition, whatever it might be, that's also lending to our stress and impacting our clients, right? So it's this complex interaction between the kids, the staff, organizations that are under a lot of pressure, as well as these systems, right? Oppressive social and economic systems. So we refer to that as collective disturbance impact, okay? So just something to keep in mind. All right, so we finally made it to, is there anything that we can do? Yes, absolutely, there are things that we can. Okay, so prevention, right? So we can think about more of an upstream approach. How do we prevent this STS from happening to ourselves to begin with? According to the National Children's Genetic Test Network, the best strategy to prevent STS is having psychoeducation, which you're doing right now, right? So you're learning about STS, having training in skills, and then also being provided with adequate supervision. Reflective supervision, right? So you're really able to process the work that you're doing with a supervisor or director. These prevention strategies reduce the risk of STS and also increase resilience. So we're going to be talking about building our own resilience. And some of the strategies might look like the skills training, doing self-assessments like you did, a self-care group maybe either inside or outside of work. At the CHC we had self-care groups once a month where no leaders were involved, it was just staff, and they got together and they rotated who was in charge of the activity, and you know, sometimes they did vision boarding, sometimes they just watched a funny movie, like whatever it is, it was just a way to take care of themselves. Having balanced caseloads, having a buddy system, so somebody, I have a workout partner and we've only ever seen each other a couple of times, but we check in with each other, right? So having somebody that helps hold you accountable, and then of course getting proper rest and nutrition and exercise. Those are all prevention aspects. Another thing that we can do in terms of prevention is to be aware of our stress level, right? So you may use a feelings thermometer with kids that you work with, or maybe you've seen it, right? So you can kind of visualize this as you're starting to get heated up or started to get stressed out, right? So at the bottom, you're just cold, you're bored, you're not focused, you're not engaged, you're trying to escape. Maybe some of you are feeling this way about this training, hopefully not. But, and then maybe the temperature gauge rises a little bit where it's cool. Like I'm a little bored, maybe lose my focus a little bit. Then there's a part where we're just, right, we're comfortable, not stressed, not anxious, we're focused, we're engaged. Warm, we're starting to get a little uncomfortable, maybe a little stressed and anxious, losing your focus. Hot is where you're moderately uncomfortable, distracted, edgy, and then very hot, like super uncomfortable, really stressed out and anxious, and you just want to get out of here now. So that's a way to kind of conceptualize you know, how you're feeling in terms of stress or anxiety, things like that. We can also promote the 3 Ps: perceive, process, and practice, right? So just basically like checking in on our emotions, right? So identifying emotions, whether they're positive or negative, and noticing the thoughts and the behaviors that are associated with those emotions. And then processing them, so recognizing that level of intensity, your feelings thermometer, when you're experiencing a negative emotion, where you're at on that thermometer, and then practicing monitoring, right? So regulating yourself, right? What are some of the things that you can do to regulate those negative emotions and also those thoughts and behaviors? Stepping back, collecting yourself, and then resuming conversations with your phone. So the 3 Ps. You can also plan ahead. So heated situations are going to happen at work, in your personal life. You can think ahead what you're going to do to cool yourself down, decide where you're going to go if you need to leave a situation, right, before you come back and have a conversation that's much more even keel. You want to notice those indicators when your heat level starts to rise, and the sooner that you are aware of it and catch it, the better you'll be at dealing with it. And then once you realize that that heat level is rising, all you have to do is tell the other person, like, I need to go cool off for a little bit. So using I statements, things like, I'm feeling upset, I need to cool down. When I come back, then we can do, right? Just really simple strategies here. With intervention, right, so there are unfortunately limited evidence on the effectiveness of STS intervention, but mindfulness and cognitive behavioral strategies have been found to be the most common. So when our level of STS has gotten to the point where it started to impact our work, and our coworkers and our supervisors are aware of it, that might be the time for more formal intervention, and that's when supervisors help to make a referral to somebody like a trauma-focused therapist, or maybe going through an employee assistance program or something like that, because it requires a different level of care. But the Dalai Lama says, in dealing with those who are undergoing great suffering, if you feel burnout setting in, if you feel demoralized or exhausted, it's best for the sake of everyone to withdraw and return to yourself. So maybe that just means taking a little bit of time off. Maybe it means, taking a half day, if you can't do a full day. Maybe that means finding a group or finding a therapist or something like that. Okay, so the point is to have a long-term perspective. Some additional tips for workplace conflict. So you want to avoid statements like they always do this or they never do this. Be aware of your own triggers in the workplace. Try to maintain professionalism and be respectful no matter how upset you are. Resist that temptation to involve yourself, right? So if it has nothing to do with you, don't get involved. And if you are involved, you can always walk away when you feel out of control. Don't personalize a problem, right? So criticism in the workplace can be expected, but that doesn't mean that you're a bad person. Try to remain open and listen to other people's perspectives. Always stay connected with coworkers and supervisors. And if you can't solve the problem alone, you can consider bringing somebody else in as a mediator. So in your packet, you have a personal mission statement, and I do want to take some time here because I think this is a really valuable exercise, right? So on your journey to wellness and self-care, I want you to think about and explore your early memories of being a caring person, right? So how did early memories of wanting to help, of wanting to be a good listener, all of those things, lead you to becoming who you are today in terms of a caregiver or a working health professional? So really processing what that means to you, and so what we can do is you have these prompts in your packet, but they're up here. Like, what led you to that work? What are some of the values that you'll never compromise when you're working with clients? What are you committed to offering your clients? What are you committed to offering yourself? What do you believe about them and your strengths? And if you were to become your ideal caregiving professional, how would life look for you? And what maybe barriers keep you from this ideal? So you don't have to answer all these questions. Let's just take 5 minutes. You can just maybe bullet point on your handout there and start to think through your personal mission statement, okay?
There's a lot of this.
I think we're all set.
Okay, great. Yeah, so this is just a start on, thinking about like why you got into this work and what's going to continue to drive you in this work, right? So it's your why, and oftentimes it's helpful to come back to our why when we're feeling like we're having these different STS symptoms. Okay? All right, so how else can we build resiliency personally, right? So we can think about our empathy and compassion is what fuels our connection with others. We build empathy and compassion when we avoid judging others and when we feel present with people. We can also avoid the phrase "at least," right? So when we say, at least it's not as bad as this guy over here, right? That's not very empathic, right? So empathy is really being there with the person and trying to understand their experience and not minimize it. We can make meaning. We know that trauma causes distress, but it also causes opportunities for growth and change, and you might have found that to be true for yourself, right? So there's a concept called post-traumatic growth, so making meaning and growing from trauma experience. Taking a look at how you perceive yourself, what capacity you have to give to relationships, and also like your overall life philosophy. So I had you kind of think about your work philosophy for a minute with your mission statement, but you can also do that for your life. The helpful thing that something that might be helpful. I've not done this personally, but I've heard of, thinking about your funeral one day and what you want people to say about you, right? Kind of thinking about what legacy you'll leave behind. In that way, could be a way of examining your philosophy on life as well, and if you're leading down the path that you want to be. So connection, relationships, right? You're not alone. We're in this together. Recognizing that we've all engaged in different processes of managing change, trying to navigate the demands that our organizations put on us, right? So we're all kind of in this together. And knowing that your feelings might shift, right, from experience to experience. So some days we have really good days, and other days aren't so great, right? Just knowing that there's an ebb and flow, a natural rhythm to things. And that, organizational culture does affect our relationships within the office. So we'll talk a little bit about organizations in a moment too. But knowing that contact with other people really is crucial, right? And I think we learned that the pandemic too. Folks that were very isolated are faring much worse than those that have remained connected and have not been socially isolated. Right? Trying to regain feelings of hopefulness, right? So stop trying to control outcomes, instead provide opportunities for change and growth. Believing that other people, clients, coworkers, the organization, leadership are doing the best that they can. Acknowledging and learning from our failures rather than blaming ourselves or blaming others. And knowing that the little things that we do may mean something important to others in the future, despite what's happening in the present, right? So keeping in mind that your actions today really do make a difference later on, and reminding yourself of past success that you've had and celebrating those things, and celebrating them as they come along. So reframing, so shifting our thinking from negative into a more positive perspective. I won't move through all of these, but for example, like my supervisor didn't say hi, she's probably disappointed with my work. Reframing that to something like, I'm just jumping to conclusions. She's been pleased with my work so far, maybe she's having a bad day, or I don't want to tell my supervisor about my last visit or my last session because it went so poorly. Reshifting that to, even though it didn't go so well, my supervisor can help me how to plan to make it better next time. Having a sense of mastery or self-efficacy, right? So when we feel competent and confident in our jobs, it helps us to maintain passion for the work, regardless of what the outcome might be. It can also, when we're regulating our negative emotions, right, our feelings thermometer and all of that, that can have us have a sense of control. And that knowing that your advocacy does matter, no matter what the outcome is. Okay, so the fact that you stood up and that you raised your voice and said something really does matter. 10 characteristics real quick of a resilient worker. They realize the importance of having a strong support system and surround themselves with positive people. They look at the positive side of things, so reframing. They have faith in themselves. They remain curious about situations and focus on new possibilities. They remain connected to their values and see the meaning in the work that they do. They focus on the important things and don't fight things that they can't control. So they save their energy for things that they can make a difference in. They take responsibility for their self-care, and they seek solutions when a problem arises. They see something negative as an opportunity, and they have a sense of humor about life's challenges, right? You have to fit in perspective. Some truths about resiliency: we accept that stress is in each of our lives and that we cannot control others. And we usually can't control our environments either. We remind ourselves that we're really only in control of our behaviors and our attitudes, and check back in with why you're doing it. So I do want to talk a little bit about mindfulness as well as grounding techniques. So mindfulness is really being fully present and aware of where we are and what we're doing, not being overly reactive or overwhelmed by what's going on around us. It's also not being stuck in the past or always thinking about the future, right? So the future can create anxiety, the past can create regret, feelings of regret. So we're gonna skip this breathing meditation, but we are gonna take 5 minutes at the very end to do a mindfulness meditation. We can also check back in at the end of our day and kind of rate ourselves. How, did I do the best to be happy, to find meaning, to build positive relationships, to stay engaged? Did I do my best to learn something new, to avoid making comments about other people, to not waste energy on what I can't change? Physically, with self-care, we can get 7 to 9 hours of sleep. That's what scientists say is the ideal amount. Eat well-balanced meals. Try to avoid eating in the car. It's not always avoidable. Or in front of the TV, limiting our sugar, drinking lots of water, using things in moderation, exercising, ideally again it's 5 days a week for 30 minutes, taking regular breaks, and then again, when our STS symptoms have risen to that level, seeking professional help. So grounding, similar to mindfulness, right? So deep breathing. There's lots of different breathing techniques out there. Triangle breathing. I can never remember. Am I supposed to hold my breath for 4 counts or exhale for 7, right? So this is a really simple deep breathing technique you can use. Just sitting up straight, taking a long, slow, deep breath in, you can stand up, and then feel that air in your lungs. You can put a hand on your abdomen and feel it expand and contract with every breath. You can put a hand on your chest and feel it expand and contract. Just really make yourself aware of the path that the air is taking within your body and leaving your body. And just doing that for about 2 minutes and noticing how your body responds. So it's really a way to shift to the present moment, to look inward at what's going on, and to kind of let everything else go. So I like that one. Great to use when you're in line at Myers or in traffic or whatever, right? So it's okay. So you do have a self-care wheel, and I believe on one side, so you've got these different domains, right? Physical, psychological, spiritual, professional. They're in your packet. On one side, it should give you lots of ideas. Is that right, or should I only use the blank one on stage?
We have both.
You have both. Okay, great. So you have one with lots of ideas, and then one with blank spaces, blank pie pieces that you can fill in. So as for kind of finishing up, if you want to start to jot some things down in each of those domains, either things that you're already doing, or maybe some new ideas that you got from your self-care assessment, you can kind of start to plug those in. And I always recommend that you leave it up on the fridge for a while, or maybe on your bathroom mirror or something where you can see it as a reminder daily. To check back in about how you're doing at self-care. So also organizationally, right? So these are things that maybe leadership can take a look at. You could have something like a morale committee, right? So a committee that's in charge of like fun things at work. So things like potlucks, or we did some door decorating. I personally did not like it. I'm not a very creative person, but people get into things like that, like maybe around the holidays or the start of the school year or whatever. You can decorate the doors, which the kids love too. You could do like a Secret Santa or a person called Holiday Home before too. Supervisors can check in weekly with their staff one-on-one to kind of gauge their SPS. There could be a staff suggestion box where it could be anonymous, but supervisors can review it on a regular basis. Kudos we used to do all the time, so just leaving like blank cards that are printed out that say kudos, or you can find different ones with different characters or whatever, but you can have staff fill them out. Just when you want to acknowledge somebody for something that they did, something that was helpful to you, something maybe that they didn't even realize that they did, jot it down on a kudos card and stick it in their mailbox that can help make their day. We talked about having a self-care meeting for staff, and maybe looking at policy in terms of a mental health day, right? So adding in, mental health instead of having to take a day off because you're sick, right? Well, I just need a day off for my mental health, and that's okay. And then encouraging staff with being aware when the need for a referral to therapy. Okay, so taking care of ourselves, this is Laura Vandernoot Lipsky, she's a trauma stewardship author. She says taking care of ourselves while taking care of others allows us to contribute to our society with such impact that we will leave a legacy informed by our deepest wisdom and greatest gifts instead of burdened with our own struggles and despair. Remember, if you think you have STS and it's negatively impacting your life, then it is time to seek some professional help, but we can all recover from it. All right, so we'll take our last few minutes. I'm going to ask if there's any questions, and then I'm going to move us into this guided meditation, and then we'll debrief, and then I'll get you out of here. So it's just a 5-minute meditation, and you can find lots of them on YouTube just by Googling guided meditation, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever you want to do. I do recommend if you've never done it before to kind of work really up to optimize. Okay.
Welcome to your meditation. I'm Dr. Robert Eric Dinnenberg, and I'll guide you through from start to finish.
Can you hear it, Monty? I'm sorry, Monty, can you hear the meditation?
Yes.
Okay, all right, great. Sorry to interrupt. Okay, here we go. So you want to kind of sit with your feet on the floor and just kind of relax, and then I do invite you to close your eyes. And I think they talk about this here. So we'll go ahead and sit.
Mindfulness is present moment attention without judgment. For this meditation, we'll attend to our feet with mindfulness, and then we'll move on to the breath and the abdomen, and then to finish, we'll return to the feet. So let's get started. With mindfulness, start to observe your feet. Answer this question to yourself. What does it feel like to have my feet on the ground in this present moment? Explore this present moment experience of your feet. You might notice what it feels like to have your feet in your shoes, in your socks. You might observe different points of pressure presenting in different parts of your feet. And you might notice temperature. Simply observe whatever you notice. There's no right or wrong, no good or bad. Whatever you notice is okay. And anything that takes you away from this noticing is a distraction. Any thought about the future or the past, any worry or expectation, any internal dialogue or judgment, notice and let go. With forgiveness, with patience, notice and let go. Notice and let go. And shepherd your attention back to your feet. And when you're ready, let go of your feet and shift your attention to your abdomen. Here we find the home base for mindfulness of breathing. Observe what it feels like to breathe in this present moment. Explore and discover your own way of noticing your own breath. You might observe a rising of your abdomen as you breathe in, and a falling as you breathe out. Your own way of noticing your own breath might include registering an expanding feeling as you breathe in, and a deflating feeling as you breathe out. Ride the waves of your breath attention. Anything that takes you away from your breath is a distraction. Any thought about the future or the past, any worry or internal dialogue, any expectation or judgment. Notice that. Notice that. The forgiveness. Notice that. And time again, shepherd your attention back to your breath. Back to answering this very simple question. What does it feel like to breathe in this present moment? And when you're ready to transition out of the meditation, return to your feet. This time there can be some movement in your toes. And notice what it feels like to be moving your toes in this present moment. And let this movement transition you out of the meditation. So as your fingers are moving, if you wish, your body's stretching, you can transition fully out of the meditation. Thank you.
All right. So again, you can find lots of meditations online. There's other apps that you can use, such as Calm. Lots of free resources for grounding meditation that you can find pretty easily. Okay, back here. Oh, can you see my screen?
Yes, guided meditation.
Guided meditation. Okay, great. I think I'm sharing the wrong screen. I know we just have a few minutes left here. So does anyone want to share real quickly anything that they noticed that came up for them during the guided meditation, or if they found it hard or easy, anything like that?
It's always easy to close your eyes.
Someone said it's always easy to close your eyes.
Okay, good. Yeah, and then if you just kind of pay attention to the words, right, it can help you to relax, to really focus in. Some people can meditate on their own. I'm not one of those people, so I kind of prefer the guided meditation. Okay, just one more tool in your toolbox, right?
Yes.
Okay. So Howard Thurman says, and she says this in the TED Talk too, don't ask yourself what the world needs, ask yourself what makes you come alive and go do that, because the world needs people to come alive. So I hope that today you've been given new strategies for your own self-care. You recognize what STS is, you can recognize the warning symptoms in yourself and in other people, and help yourself to get the care that you need, and be able to give the care that you need to, that your colleagues need as well when you see that they're in distress. So any questions before I let you guys go today?
No questions.
You need to meditate more often.
We need to meditate more often was one of the comments.
Absolutely, yes. Try to make it a daily practice for sure. I think you'll definitely see some changes. So I thank you again. It's been wonderful. I wish that we could have been in person throughout the series, but I really thank you for the opportunity for being able to come and present to all of you as we've gone on. If there's anything I can do in the future, please let me know. And yeah, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.
We thank you so much, Lacey.
Okay.
The audience said thank you.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. Have a good day.
Bye for now.
Okay, bye.